Welcome to the Midweek Wednesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Glad you're able to spend some time with us here as we continue to roll through the last full week of the year before the Christmas holidays take over and everybody gets into the spirit and so on and so forth. It looks like the snow, at least here in HRM, that we accumulated over the last couple of days is on its way out. Looking at the forecast, we're looking at showers today and a high around 6 degrees. That's pretty nice for December, isn't it? Tomorrow, a little bit cooler, but a little less wet. We'll see a temperature around 3. And then Alistair Alders, our meteorologist, telling me that Friday we're looking at some showers, but not until the afternoon. And a high of, get this, 12 degrees. Certainly a big swings from what we saw at the beginning of the week. And then it looks like that's going to continue through until Saturday. We'll see some rain, maybe mixing with some flurries, but a high temperature on Saturday will be 5 degrees. So the chances as these temperatures rise and as we see a little bit of rain instead of snow, the chances of that brown Christmas are getting better and better. But, of course, there is a meteorological term for white Christmas. It's 2 centimeters on the ground and Christmas morning. So that could still happen. It could. We'll get an update from Alistair on Friday with regards to what he thinks is going to happen for us for Christmas Day. Well, it's certainly the topic of discussion around water coolers and at the coffee shops and in line at the grocery store. And that, of course, is the decision from the utility regulator in Nova Scotia yesterday with regards to Halifax Water. Now, the Energy Board said yesterday that the 35.6, or for easy math, 36% increase that the utility had called for was, quote, unjustified and overestimated. Now, don't get me wrong, we're going to see an increase next year. But with 15 days left in 2025, we still don't know by how much. The utility regulator said yesterday they'd like to hear from Halifax Water next week, which, of course, is the beginning of Christmas. So we're going to head into the Christmas holiday, as many already are there. Others are going to begin all that stuff on Friday. Others, like the Todd Veinotte Show, will be working next week, at least for a couple of days. But we still don't know what our water bill is going to be next year. Halifax Water said yesterday that they need that money due to things like inflation and rising interest rates, depleted reserve funds, aging infrastructure, and depreciation. And they said in their statement to the media yesterday that there is no profit built into those rates. So they're not making money on that 36% should they get it. The regulator, as part of its decision yesterday, suggested that Halifax Water turn to HRM to absorb financial shortfalls that contributed to its accumulated deficit. So the regulator on one hand said, look, guys, that we don't think that you need all of that. We don't think that that your numbers are correct. We don't think that it's justified, and we think that you overestimate it. So take your homework back home and do it again, essentially is what's happened. But in a parting shot, the utility said, we understand that you're in a financial situation, so why don't you just approach HRM and maybe they'll help bail you out. Well, you can imagine that didn't go over very well with our mayor, who very quickly yesterday put out a statement right after the decision was made and said, essentially, thanks, but no thanks. Going one step further, asking both the cities and the province's auditors general to take a look at the internal governance of the utility and file a report on that. So not only did he say, no, sorry, I mean, we know the situation that the city's in, right? They're already at a 10.5% increase. And can you imagine if they tacked on some of the money that Halifax Water needs or wants? The mayor taking it that step further and said no. And in fact, I think it's time that we get a real good look at what's going on inside the inner workings of Halifax Water. All of this happening, folks, a day after CTV reported on Monday that an investigation is underway at that utility looking into what are being described as financial irregularities. It's the never-ending story of Halifax Water this week, isn't it? And at the end of the day, you and I and Vanessa, who's doing a great job, by the way, and everybody else still don't know what our water bill is going up in January. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I guess on one side of the coin, before we get to our first guest, is that I guess we should be congratulating the UARB or whatever it's called now for saying no to a utility rate increase. But on the other side of it, yeah, they said no, but now we don't know what it's going to be in 2026 or in 2027. There's a pathway here for a smaller increase than we had first anticipated in 2026, right? I think we're probably going to see that. But there's nothing to suggest that doesn't just get kicked down the road a year and that the water rate increase in 27 makes up the 36% that the utility needs. So I'm going to suggest it was maybe a small victory yesterday for the ratepayer, but certainly not an all-out victory. You can imagine that there have been has been lots of reaction to the announcement yesterday from various forms of government, from different stakeholders groups, and one of the releases that hit my inbox yesterday read, and I'm going to quote the line in here that really grabbed my attention, and it comes to us, by the way, from the rental housing providers Nova Scotia and from the desk of its CEO, and that's Kevin Russell, and it reads, and I quote, "Make no mistake, today's decision," which was yesterday, "by the Nova Scotia Regulatory and Appeals Board means that Halifax Water customers," easy for me to say, "will be paying through the nose." We're very pleased to welcome to the show the author of that quote, and that is the aforementioned Kevin Russell. Kevin, how are you?
Dan, I'm good today, and thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. You and I have had disagreements on things in the past, but I think we're both in agreement on this, that yesterday's announcement really didn't clear up much.
No, our thoughts and our align here, Dan, and you coined it very well. And so, yes, we're on the same page here.
Kevin, you and I have talked about landlords and we've talked about rental caps and we've talked about all that stuff in 2025. When we have a decision like this, which is essentially a non-decision and telling the utility to take their homework back and do it again, that has to create some real consternation for all the landlords of Nova Scotia, because at the end of the day, they don't know what 2026 is going to look like when it comes to their water rates.
Well, that's correct, Dan. I mean, currently, right now, all our members are into budgeting for 2026, and of course, when you're doing budgets, you have to have accurate information to be able to present to your funders. And this is a big missing piece of the puzzle for our members to be able to complete their budgeting process. And
not to mention, when people that are in business and landlords are in business, right? To do their strategic planning, they like to have a couple of years out to know where their expenses are going to go. And with yesterday's announcement from the utilities regulator, we don't know what's going to happen next year, nor what's going to happen in 27.
Well, again, you're correct, and Dan, let's not forget, this is just not only water. We got Halifax Council looking at a 10% tax increase this year, and they're predicting in 2027 and 2028 that more of the same, 12 to 13% increases are expected. So we're into a very bad situation here when you start combining all the increases that are being planned, whether it's Halifax Water or Halifax Council or Nova Scotia Power. And it's really shedding light, actually, on the fact that, it's not rental housing providers that are driving up the cost of rents. People are finally figuring out that it's government and utilities that are the biggest drivers of rent increases, and this insanity has to stop.
Kevin, we've, as I mentioned off the preamble, we've talked about rent caps in the past, and the assertion that landlords are each year falling behind further because of their inability, because of the cap, to raise rents. When we see a utility increase like this one, which it was 36%, what it's going to be, we don't know. We're looking at somewhere 6, 7, 8, 9% increase in taxes. We're looking at a significant increase in power rates in both this year and next year. When you're a landlord and you're only able to raise that rent by 5%, that has to be a lump of coal in the stocking at this time of the year, right?
No question, and people are really questioning whether they should be in this business. I mean, particularly the small family-managed businesses that operate single-family home rentals, townhouses, duplexes. They're just shaking their head, and there is something in the regulators' decision that's going to cause more consternation for the smaller landlords where water is not included in the rent, and it's up to the tenant to pay the water. In 6 months, so in June next year, the new tenants that are moving in, that bill will be the responsibility of the rental housing provider, and it won't be in the tenant's name. So this is another decision that we have to deal with. So this is going to have a great impact on our industry.
Kevin, you intervened in this one, did you not?
Yes, we did.
Are you disappointed with the decision from the regulator?
Yeah, because of the fact we know what the impact is going to be. We proposed a reasonable alternative to the rate hikes that Halifax Water was seeking. We proposed a 5% increase in each of the next 5 years. And we thought that was pretty reasonable, as did our supporters in the Stop the Rate Hike campaign and our members. And it was ignored. And we're left scratching our heads. And it would have equaled out to the same increase that the water, Halifax Water received by this decision.
Halifax Water has to come back now to the regulator next week, which is, of course, Christmas week, right? And
right.
What do you hope that we'll see here? Do you hope that they'll spread it out over 5, or that we'll get some kind of idea where we're at, or the regulator called it unjustified and overestimated? So I guess the bottom line is most ratepayers are looking for this 36 number to disappear.
Well, I don't believe that's going to happen. They're going to come back and they're going to make a few tweaking adjustments. And this part of the process is very confusing and caught us by surprise, and we're still trying to figure out what the impact is going to be. But I wouldn't get our hopes up too high. I think we gotta look at the fact that we're probably looking at a 20+% increase for 2026 into 2027. So because the one increase will occur January 1st, and the second increase will begin April 1st. So we're not too optimistic. I guess it's best to have low expectations, and anything over above is going to be good.
Kevin, of course, have a Merry Christmas, and I'm sure we'll be talking very early in January.
Dan, likewise to you and your family, and to all your listeners, and to the staff. A Merry Christmas, and we will have lots to talk about in 2026.
I imagine. Kevin, have a good one.
Cheers.
That's Kevin Russell. Wow. I can't imagine. Landlords, obviously there's discussions on both sides of that rent cap, right? There certainly is. There's there's a need for controls because things were going out of control. But now we're seeing all of the, and I'm going to use a term that's probably incorrect, all the inputs that landlords have to deal with, right? Utilities is a huge, taxes are huge, right? So now we don't even know what the water rating's going to be, and what does that mean for tenants moving forward, and what does that mean for affordability? What does that mean for people that are looking to get into the rental market in 2026 or trying to improve their lives when these what are being described by the regulator as unjustified and overestimated increases are going to be upon us. It's 2026 is going to be an interesting start to the year. That is very, very clear. Cybercrime, we've been talking about that a lot here in Nova Scotia with the hack that happened at Nova Scotia Power. We're going to dig into it just a little bit. More resources being called for by a cybersecurity expert from Dalhousie University. Dr. Nur Zincir-Heywood will be joining us right after the break. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in minutes. Well, I would imagine that as we gather next week with friends and family to celebrate the holidays, whatever holidays it is that you celebrate, there's going to be discussions around the dinner tables and perhaps in the living rooms of people's houses and so on and so forth about the year that was. And I'm pretty sure that one of the topics that's going to get raised with those discussions is going to be cybersecurity, hacks, and, of course, in relation to Nova Scotia Power. Now, we know that things like data breaches and things like cyber attacks are nothing new, but this one really kind of hit home for everybody, considering that most of us, if not all of us now, have received that letter in the mail saying that our personal information that was held by Nova Scotia Power is in the hands of the dark web, and where it goes from there is anybody's guess. And it certainly has raised a lot of questions, at least in my mind, about cybersecurity and data breaches. And we've very lucky to welcome our next guest into the show today to tell us a little bit about these kind of events and what's needed to prevent them from happening maybe as much in the future. And I'm very pleased to welcome into the program today on the phone is Dr. Nur Zincir-Heywood from Dalhousie University. Doctor, how are you?
Thank you very much. Please just call me with my first name.
Okay. How about doctor? Does that work?
All right. I'm not a medical doctor. Yeah, computer science doctor, why not?
There you go. That works for me. Thanks for joining us today. As I mentioned in the preamble, there has been a lot of discussion on this show and in the coffee shops and on the street corners here in HRM about cybersecurity in light of the Nova Scotia Power breach earlier this year that has impacted so many people. I guess in your field of work, is this something that raises attention to the problem and perhaps gets more people involved in trying to figure out how these things happen and how to prevent them?
Yes, actually, it's one of those, bad things that we learn and hopefully will get better and turn into a good news in terms of awareness around cybersecurity. Ransomware is one of the most common forms of cybercrime, and usually it happens because a malicious software get into your device, and that device, which has your data, your files, are then held back for ransom, right? And what happened in recently with Nova Scotia Power is a very sophisticated version of this type of an attack, but this can happen to anyone, not just big organizations, small to medium-sized enterprises, and to people. And of course, when you are a critical infrastructure provider, such as Nova Scotia Power, you are more of a target of these type of attacks.
You have to wonder what business people are thinking. Everything's online now these days, right? You can't even go into a small store shop without something being on in the cloud or online somewhere. And obviously, the smaller the business, the less ability you have to deal with something like a cyberware attack.
Yes, you are very right, and I think I always say to my students and my friends that the best security is being not connected to the internet. But of course, that's not reasonable or even feasible in today's world, right? So right. I think the issue is for all organizations and us as end users, we should all kind of start doing simple cyber safe behaviors. And the more we practice these behaviors, it's almost like the cyber hygiene, right? We got better and better, and they turn into a habit, which then protects us a bit more into the future. So there are simple things, such as making sure we have very strong passwords in all our accounts as individuals. And if we have this habit and turn it into even the longer the better, passphrases, sentences that you can remember and use them as your passwords, then I think you are making the very first step towards being cyber safe and a good cyber hygiene. For organizations, and again for end users, I think it's important to keep all our devices, from our smartphones to tablets to computers, laptops, everything at the most updated version of the operating system that particular device needs. This is again something simple. It takes time and maybe not that convenient when our device automatically says, "Hey, the next update is ready." Well, you know what? Put time aside and make sure you make the patches, as we call it. And if it's possible, making sure that you opt for multi-factor authentication. So something you know, like your password or passphrase, together with something you own, something like your smartphone. Those two needs to be correct to identify you. It's just an example. Last but not the least, make sure you are cyber safe on all your social media platforms. End users, if we follow these guidelines, I think by definition, when we work in any enterprise, whether it's a critical infrastructure provider or a small to medium retail, these habits will also continue to work at our work environments.
Doctor, I get lots of emails doing what I do here each and every day, and I try to be very safe, to avoid the Trojan horse, to not compromise our system here. But the bad actors out there are getting much more sophisticated with the addition of artificial intelligence and so on and so forth. When it comes to email, what's the best practice to avoid compromising your inner networks?
You are very right. Everything is getting more and more sophisticated with the new technologies coming in. So I think the best way to do this is being very, very cautious. Almost like take a deep breath before you act on whatever the email is telling you. And usually that is very helpful, because when we are cautious, when we take a step back, take a deep breath and look at the content, if they are asking personal information, that's a red flag. Doesn't matter how sophisticated it's written or how much spelling mistake it has. If they are asking for pictures, if they are asking us to click on a link that looks legitimate, an important file attached that they want us to maybe read and comment on. Doesn't matter where this email is coming from, our boss, from our child, from our parent, from our best friend. Let's double check. I think that's kind of the best foot forward. Double check in terms of maybe you call your child and say, did you really send me this email? You call your bank and talk to them. Did you really ask me to provide a password for you? Most of the time, banks never ever ask you to give them a password or click on a link or open a document, right? The more cautious we act and look at, unfortunately, everything as untrustable, the less likely we will be part of a phishing scam, which can lead to a ransomware.
Lots of valuable information there. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Looking forward to our next conversation. That is Dr. Nur Zincir-Heywood, a cybersecurity expert at Dalhousie University. Getting set for an update. Blake's going to update us on what's going on in the news. On the other side of it, time for a little Murphy Logic with Steve Murphy. He'll be our guest right after the break. I think from time to time it's important here on the Todd Veinotte Show, particularly when I'm hosting it, that we bring somebody with some logic into the studio and set me straight, so to speak, because sometimes I think maybe that I'm just anyway.
Since that person wasn't available, you called me. How thoughtful.
Oh, that voice is resonating with many listeners right now. Of course, the dulcet tones of one Steve Murphy, who we haven't spoken to since I think the budget, so it's well overdue. I know, Steve, you've been, my goodness, every time I turn on my television or I look in the papers to see what's going on, you're at some kind of event.
It's been busy. We just had a great Christmas Daddy show, of course, one of the best in many, many years. And a number of people have said to me, "Boy, times are tough. Are you surprised that it's like $925,000?"
Yes.
And, it always goes one of two ways. In tough times, people either have to pull back because they can't afford to be as helpful as they would like to be, or those who can help do more. And I think that may be what we saw a little bit this year, because there are a lot of people in this province, a lot of people in this region, in our country, who need help. And we just need to accept that this is a very hard time for people.
It is.
And I think maybe Christmas Daddies, the response to it this year is a good indication that there is an understanding on the part of the larger community that the people who need help really need an embrace.
Sometimes it gets, I think, overused, the Blue Noser spirit thing, right?
Yeah.
That, we when events happen and times get really tough, and you can list the event after event, that Nova Scotians tend just to rally around each other. They really do.
I don't think it's exaggerated. I think, and maybe this is explained because this province, this region, has known more than its share of hardship. And those who experienced hardship are often the people who, when able, are most responsive to those in need. And I think we've seen a demonstration of that again this year. The Salvation Army, which is the partner of Christmas Daddies, wonderful organization, they said that the need is way greater this year. But earlier in their messaging, they also said, but if you can't afford to give, well, don't. And I think that the people who can afford to give are stepping up. And I commend all of those who did and all of those who do.
It's a great program and a wonderful organization. Yeah. And you guys always do a great job. I watched a lot of it, and of course made my contribution.
Yeah, thank you.
That all being said, Steve, it has been a year of news. My goodness, it's been a week has been a year of news, and the one that of course is right on top of everybody's agenda right now is this decision yesterday from the utilities regulator on the Halifax Water. What's your thoughts on it?
It's a decision, but it's not the answer.
Right.
I mean, we know that the bills are going to be capped, and I have to say that is the common sense answer, because I accept that the water utility needs to work on infrastructure. Maybe they need a new headquarters, all of those things. But by the same token, I just don't see how people can afford to pay these kind of increases, particularly coupled as they are with property taxes. Now, you've been able to get the councillors down to talking about 6.5% or 7%. I don't think people can afford that either.
No.
Now, and again, some people can, for sure. Some people can. Most people can't.
And let's not forget, that's the rate, right?
And that's the rate.
We don't know what the assessment's going to be this year.
Well, and again, you always talk about the assessment, and it is the assessment by the tax rate that gives you the tax bill. I remember when Andy Fillmore was running for mayor and we did a debate. I did a debate with him and the other council mayor candidates for the Lebanese Chamber of Commerce. And I remember saying to Mayor Fillmore, now Mayor Fillmore, freezing the tax rate isn't that helpful. What we need to do is freeze the tax bills. And, of course, the tax bills are not going to be frozen. We're looking at a big increase.
Right, absolutely.
But you take the tax bill, the water bill, the power bill, the grocery bill, and we've just heard today that it looks like groceries are going to be good for another 2.5 or 3 points next year. This is hard for people. This is very, very hard.
$900 more a year for a family of four at the grocery store.
Yeah.
I don't know how people do it now, never mind next year.
No, it's true. It's true. And again, we've heard, and we've ample evidence to support this from the food banks and otherwise, that in the end, if it comes down to a choice between the 2 liters of milk for the kids or the 2 liters of soft drink, most people are going to have to give in to the soft drink at least some of the time because the kids need to drink something. But we all know that they shouldn't be drinking 2 liters of soft drink instead of 2 liters of milk,
right?
Which is the choice that a lot of people are looking at. So yeah, it's tough. So I think the regulator has done the proper thing in saying it can't be 37% or whatever it was. But what is it going to be?
Now we don't know.
We don't know.
And the part about it that is more confusing to me is that if the utility comes back next week, which is like Christmas, by the way, and says, okay, this is what we can do for 26. It might be 7, 8, 9%.
Yeah,
we don't know what's going to happen in 27.
No, we don't. And I think the premier and the mayor are right to be asking for higher levels of accountability from the utilities. And again, there's some political theater in this, and I'm going to excuse the political theater because I think that sometimes you do the right thing maybe for the wrong reason. I think the premier is right to call for some sort of an inquiry or at least a careful review of Nova Scotia Power, and I think the mayor is right to ask the auditors general to take a look at the water.
It's the right mechanism.
Not because there's necessarily any malfeasance or mismanagement, but because we need to know going forward what the expectation on the ratepayer is going to be. And the only way to do that is to have somebody from an outside perspective take a look at it, in my opinion.
Particularly on the news a couple of days ago that CTV reported that there's an internal investigation underway right now for financial irregularities at Halifax Water.
And if there are any financial irregularities, they need to be exposed in the full light of day.
And I think the auditors general, both of them, are in the proper position to be able to do that.
Sure. But allow me to say this: even if there is no financial mismanagement, if there's no malfeasance, if everything is just the way it is, we still need to take a good, hard, long look at how these public utilities, and again, Nova Scotia Power is privately owned but does serve the public. The water utility is publicly owned. We need high levels of accountability and transparency, particularly when we're being asked to pony up so much more money. And incidentally, I don't disagree that the water infrastructure in this town is in trouble.
No doubt.
We see stuff being built up. We don't see what's going on underground, where a lot of the mains are in bad shape. Some of them are, I think some of them are 100 plus years old.
Right.
I've been told there's still wood carrying water in Halifax.
Ah.
That's obviously not sustainable, and development is now being stunted because our capacity to handle more water and sewage is limited by the underground infrastructure. And so it may be that we have to spend some money, but 37%, no, we can't.
Waverly
we can't.
Road last weekend was a prime example of what can happen.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And we also have, and I don't know if reliability is the right way to describe it, but we also have troubles at both sources where we've had water restrictions in the Dartmouth side, those on Lake Major for the last 2 summers.
Yep.
We know the intake there's too high up in the water. We know that there are also concerns over at Pockwalk.
Right.
We know that the fluoridation thing, it just goes on and
well,
on and on.
Dan, a lot of things come down to supply and demand. Has the demand for water and sewage gone up in Halifax? Well, the population's doubled in the 45 years I've lived here.
Right.
So, sure, we know that there is increased demand, and we're going to need to spend money on infrastructure. But we do need to take a good, comprehensive look and be completely transparent about what's at stake here.
Tax increases. That's another burden that we're going to have to face. Boy. We know that the budget cycle's underway. Steve, you've been through more budgets than I have. I'm not considering that you've been around longer than I have. But you've been through these processes longer.
I've been through more birthdays than you, Dan.
You've been through these processes before.
Yeah.
But this time around, I'm getting a different tone from council. I'm getting okay. This number is where we're starting, and we're gonna find savings and efficiencies. But almost to a person, councillors that have sat in those chairs have all told me that we're looking at a significant increase even after they find efficiency.
Yeah, no, I've heard that, and good on you for getting them to acknowledge that. But I think we're going to have to ask ourselves, how large is our bureaucracy in the Halifax region, and how much service can we expect, and are we prepared to pay for? And that is the duty of council. But I think that, and I'm not going to sit here and assume that we have a lot of people who work for the municipality who don't do a good job. I'm not going to assume that. But I think we do need to take a look at how large our municipal government is, because human costs are, and you're a manager, human costs are always one of your top line items.
You got it.
Running a radio station, you've got human costs that are right at the top with your transmission costs and all the other things. But I think the municipality probably needs to take a look at how large the bureaucracy is and how long we can sustain it, and how much people are prepared and able to pay for what level of service. So at the risk of, and I realize that there's consultation that goes on here Mondays with councillors on the hot seat, but maybe it is time to take a good, hard, long look at what level of service people actually expect and are prepared to pay for through their property taxes. The other thing is, and I've said this before for many years, when I was doing talk radio many years ago in this town, we need a different way for municipal government to raise funds, because property taxes, for starters, are not particularly fair, but it's also just it's a one-trick pony.
And it's well over 70% of the general revenue is taxes.
But it would have to be. It would have to be. And let's not forget that some of what the municipality collects goes to the province. And,
right.
All of these complications need to be considered. But at the risk of, using a shop-worn phrase, there's only one taxpayer.
Yep.
And he's sitting behind the microphone, and it doesn't matter how you get to the bottom line if you can't afford to pay it. So, Dan, when you look at your property tax bill or your whatever bill you're paying, how you got to the big number doesn't really matter if you can't afford to pay the big number. So let's take a look at how are we getting to these big numbers.
When we come back, Steve Murphy's going to stick around for the next 15 minutes. And on the agenda, remuneration. Raises in a troubled time with Halifax Council. Steve Murphy is our guest. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. All right, welcome back. Steve Murphy is our guest right up here until the top of the hour. Steve, there's been a lot of discussion, as you well know, because I know you listen to the program quite frequently.
I do.
About council getting a 4% increase in salary as they're debating a 10.5% increase in the tax rate. Your thoughts on council remuneration?
No, it's a no-win situation. Politicians giving themselves pay raises is not popular. Deferring the decision to third parties is not popular. The point is, I think we need to have a fair level of pay for all political leaders and predictable pay increases that reflect probably the cost of living or a fraction thereof. And I think the key is that the electorate needs to be told going into an election what the formula is going to be. So, for example, if the Premier thinks that MLAs are going to get a raise or deserve a raise, he should say, heading into the next election campaign, we propose to give MLAs a raise of 2/3 of the CPI or whatever, and that's what we're going to do. I think we need to take the surprise out of it. But I'll tell you this, I've never heard anybody support the idea of a politician getting a raise. But at the risk of, and this won't be well received by some people, I think historically our politicians haven't been particularly well paid. And they're often accused of having gold-plated pensions and so on and so on. And there's some truth in that. There are great benefits that come with politics. But the idea behind the pensions used to be that, well, you get into politics for 6 or 7 years, you give up 6 or 7 years of your prime income earning stage of life, and you deserve to be compensated at the other end. Now we've got career politicians who spend their entire lives in politics and get really, really souped-up pensions, and we need to take a look at the whole thing, but I think it needs to be predictable and based on something that doesn't change with the wind as it blows. So I don't know if I've answered your question. Do the councillors deserve a raise? Perhaps they do. Right now it's somewhat automatic. Right. That there's a calculation and boom, you get a raise. They can defer or decline the raise.
They can.
I've heard members of council say it's too late to do so. Well, if you actually believe that, then accept the raise and give it back. Refund it to
Did
the
Peter Kelly do that? Didn't he give it to charity?
I think he did. And it seems to me the Premier, Tim Houston, when he was elected, I believe he reduced his pay. He gave some back. We've had mayors who gave money back to charity. But the whole point is leadership is by example. And at this point, I would say that it doesn't feel right for the political leadership to be getting pay raises. That said, their power bills are going up too. Their property tax bills are going up too. Their steak and their potatoes and their eggs and their bacon and their bread, it all costs more too. So if we start out assuming that they're fairly paid to begin with and then give them predictable raises based on perhaps a fraction of the Consumer Price Index or the CPI, then maybe we reach a point where people are less irritable about it. But I don't expect any great support for pay raises for politicians ever. And ever only has one meaning.
Yeah, no doubt, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're almost out of time, Steve. It goes so quickly. I'd like to get your thoughts on the goings-on in Ottawa, particularly with this business of floor crossings. We saw another one last week. There's some indication, at least from the Liberal side of things, that there is some more interest in that happening. Your thoughts on the floor crossing and the leadership of the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre?
Floor crossing is permitted in the parliamentary system. It's been practiced for time immemorial. We could argue against it. We could change it, but we can't change it retroactively. Did Mr. Ma have the right to cross the floor? He did. You shouldn't go to the party with the guy the night before and then cross the floor the next day. I'm sorry.
That was wild.
No, I don't think that's acceptable behavior. It's rather like a married couple going out the night before, serving divorce papers one on the other and having a nice dinner. I mean, you just don't do that.
Right.
You don't do that. So Mr. Ma had the right to do it. I don't think he did it the right way. I don't think he's the last one. I think that there's a very strong likelihood we end up with a majority government, maybe even by the end of the year. Is that the way we're supposed to do it in the country? Yes, it is actually. I know that people say we didn't vote for this, but you vote for members of Parliament. The members of Parliament then decide in whom they have confidence. The person who commands the confidence of Parliament leads the government. That's how we make our government. This is a different way to do it. It's a different way to bake the cookies, but you still get the same cookies at the end. So if we want to change the system, you can't do it retroactively.
And the government of the day is going to change the system who's benefiting from it. So the chances of that happening are zero.
Have you noticed that people have ideas in opposition that they decide they don't? For example, I remember Timothy Jerome Houston saying that he wanted a fixed election date, something that at the time I supported.
And then he brought it in.
And then he brought it in.
And then he got rid of it.
And then he got rid of it. Yeah. What can I say? It looked like a good idea until... It wasn't a good idea.
Sticking in Ottawa, Steve, again, almost out of time. Mr. Poilievre to face a leadership review in January. Some at the summer break were saying this is a foregone conclusion. Yeah. Is it the same now? Is there going to be a little more difficult for him?
Yeah, it's different. The problem is it will be Pierre Poilievre himself who decides whether he gets enough support. I believe 50% plus one is all you need. In 1983, Joe Clark said 67% wasn't enough. Joe Clark was never as unpopular as Pierre Poilievre is with some people. He's quite popular with some in the party, but he's making a lot of unforced errors, and frankly, I just don't understand it, Dan, because I think, and I've said this before, I think Pierre Poilievre is a very bright guy. I don't understand why he keeps saying the same thing when the polls keep telling him that the public doesn't like what he's saying. That doesn't really make sense to me.
Be interesting to see the vote unfold. And very quickly, Steve, out west into Alberta, I know that we don't necessarily mess around with Alberta politics a lot here, but when the premier of the day, Danielle Smith, goes to the well 4 times in the last year to bring in the notwithstanding clause. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when we put the notwithstanding clause in the Constitution, and we did it because there wouldn't have been a deal otherwise. There were warnings that this would happen, and lo and behold, this is happening for political reasons, and not just in Alberta. This is a big country, and in some respects, we don't have a lot in common with Alberta except the fact that we're all Canadians, we share a landmass, we share a history and so on. But Alberta's experience in this country is much different than ours. We've got grievances here, too. I understand some of their grievances. I do. And I think that that the government, which is based in the East, and by that I mean, the capital is in the eastern part of the country. Ontario and Quebec still carry the water in the country in terms of the electoral power that they wield. Alberta is a tremendous contributor to this country, and the resources of Alberta, controversial though they are, have been good for Canadians. Have they been good for the environment? Well, now we realize, of course, they haven't been. But Ottawa has a history of, I don't think, treating Alberta particularly fairly, and I understand some of their grievances. I don't like the notwithstanding clause, but again, at the risk of being the broken record, the time to change it is before people use it. You can't change it retroactively. It's good. It's good for 5 years, and then it has to be renewed, unless the Supreme Court wants to weigh in. Do we want a constitutional crisis in the country? No, but we're probably going to have one because Alberta may have a referendum, and it looks like Quebec could be having another referendum too.
There's all kinds of inner turmoil happening in that province.
Yeah.
The time flies by with Steve Murphy. What does Christmas look like in the Murphy household?
Well, it's going to be a family. It's going to be a family time, and it should be. I mean, and here's the thing I'd like to leave you with, Dan.
Sure.
This has been a really tough week. I mean, we saw a terrible thing happen on Bondi Beach in Australia. A terrible, hateful, despicable thing. We saw a terrible, despicable thing happen in beautiful Providence, Rhode Island. We saw the assassination allegedly by his own child of Rob Reiner and his wife, and these are all dreadful things, and I think they're heartbreaking for us all. But there is still a lot of good going on, and it's important, I think, at this time of year particularly, and I'm going to do this on TV tomorrow night. I'm going to talk about the Salvation Army and the good they're doing, because there is an enormous amount of good that goes on every day, and an enormous number of good people doing good things. And let's not lose sight of that, particularly at this time of year. And you don't have to be Christian to be into this. I mean, it's a Christian holiday, yes. You don't have to be a practicing Christian to understand peace on earth, goodwill toward men, the essential message from Jesus, whether you follow him or whether you don't. The love of your neighbor, turn the other cheek, be a better person. This is a good time of year to remind ourselves there's a lot of that going on. So let's not forget that.
The immortal words of Steve Murphy. Merry Christmas, sir.
A Happy New Year and a Merry Christmas to you and everybody here at the little engine that could. Yeah, this radio station. There's hardly anybody here. Just you and Vanessa in here.
Right.
When people say to you and your team.
Yeah.
And
to be
it's
quite honest,
team.
it's mostly her.
Well, I know that.
Thanks, brother.
Okay, buddy.
That is Steve Murphy.
Hey, Todd. Todd Veinotte. Are you listening, buddy?
I'm sure
Christmas.
he is, and we send that as well. Time to get an update on the news. When we come back, it's time for John Gillis. House calls, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the update. Always a pleasure to have Steve join us in the studio here and impart his knowledge upon all of us. He certainly has raised some very interesting points, something you might want to talk about when we open up the telephone lines. We're going to do that at noon today because it is Wednesday, of course, and the Mid-Week Meltdown goes at 12 noon. That makes way, of course, for our next segment, and that is House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. If you have a medical question, if you have something you'd like an opinion on, maybe a second opinion on, or you'd just like to ask Dr. John a question, this is your opportunity to do so. The number is 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. That's the number again, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Dr. John joining us here momentarily, and we will get to those calls as soon as we can. As I mentioned, the open hour will go at noon today, and there is certainly lots to talk about, particularly after yesterday's pronouncement from the utility regulator on Halifax Water. And you and I and Vanessa and everybody else still don't know what our water rate is going to be next year. And it's just been, I don't know if comedy of errors is the right way to describe the goings-on at Halifax Water as of late, but when it comes to your utilities, I think we're going to take that dollar and stretch it even further when we move into 2026. And for some, unfortunately, that means that that dollar is going to snap in two. I know it's hard to do with a coin these days, but you get the analogy, right? Again, just connecting up with Dr. John here very quickly, and we'll get to house calls in a moment. 902-405-6000 is the number, or 1-877-801-8255. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs, Dr. John, have figured out how to win games that they're behind in, and that's have a tribute to a former Halifax broadcaster, that being Joe Bowen.
Well, I was doing a few things last night watching it, and I turned it on, and I'm like, here we go again. And then I'm like, I left the room for a few minutes, and it's 2-1, 2-2, and I'm like, well, drive it like you stole it.
Right.
Scored like a garbage goal, which they never get. They never get that lucky garbage goal, and So hey, take it.
Yeah, we'll take it. We'll put the W in the column. That is for sure. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Dr. John, we like to start this segment off getting an idea what's happening out there. What's the ER been like as of late?
I was there yesterday. Very busy but manageable, I would say. We weren't overrun with admitted patients, and just sort of a routine, very busy day, but not a shit show, if we can use a technical term.
The Dr. Strang out saying, urging people to get their flu vaccinations. I imagine you're getting lots of respiratory ailments in the ER?
Yeah, look, I mean, we say to everybody, I mean, people are, there's vaccine fatigue out there. The flu shot is not perfect. The COVID shot's not perfect. It's not, a conspiracy of the World Economic Fund, the UN, the WHO, or whoever else is being blamed for everything these days. Bottom line is, if you can protect yourself from any of these things, you should do it. Flu, COVID, if you're older, RSV, if you're eligible for the vaccine, protect yourself from whatever, because you're lessening or preventing illness for yourself and often for other people as well, which is key.
A lot of people just kind of, blow off the flu, saying, well, it's just the flu, it happens every year, but we're seeing some kind of tragic stories happening in Quebec, particularly with kids.
Well, that's it, right? And you don't know what's going to happen with it. You don't know how it mutates. You don't know how it changes. And, again, we talked about this, this goes back to Andrew Crystal and I talked about this, during the Boer War when he used to be on the show 100 years ago. It's the same thing. People don't need to be dying of measles. The U.S. does not need to be losing its measles-free status, but here we are. We just need to do everything we can. We don't want to go back to lockdowns. We don't want to be overbearing. We just want to keep people as healthy as we possibly can.
And ease up some of the burden on the ER where you work daily.
Well, that's it. And look, it hasn't been too bad, as I said. The weather's been good. Maybe it's a little early in the season, but again, the wait times yesterday were actually quite good. But we see often, all ages. They've been there for 8 hours. Oh, I think I have the flu. Yes, you do. Period, stop. As in, how I can't really do much for you other than advise you to keep yourself hydrated, take regular Tylenol and ibuprofen or both, and wait it out. And people get really frustrated by that. And, this comes back to education, support, and prevention as best we can.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That's the way onto the program. Lines are wide open here for Dr. John Gillis here on Wednesday morning. Dr. John, this email, a holdover from last week, and it reads like this. I'm 50-year-old male. I've been having lower back pain for years. Comes on every couple of months, then fades over a week or two. Makes it so I can't stand straight. Difficult to bend all the way over, and especially twist, all the usual stuff. The most recent time that I had the TENS machine on, the most recent event of back pain was when I had my right leg feeling half asleep. Luckily, this time I will have a checkup in the middle of the month of next month. My question for you is, Dr. John, if I'm not experiencing back pain at the time that I get my MRI done, will it still show up?
Well, it depends what it is. If you're having pain and numbness, tingling pain down the leg, I would say it's fairly likely that there's either a protruding disc pressing on a nerve, or there's a narrowing where one of the nerve roots comes out. So yes, just because you're not having active pain at the time doesn't mean that something may not show up. But the flip side is also true, and I try to explain this to people. We order scans all the time in people who have a lot of pain, and I believe them, it's genuine, but the scan doesn't show anything. It doesn't show anything clear, and this is why it's complicated. Back pain can come from multiple sources. It can come from muscles, it can come from discs, it can come from nerve roots, it can come from a lot of different things. And just because a scan doesn't show something doesn't mean you don't have pain. Just because it does show something doesn't mean that that's the cause of the pain or that you need surgery. So it's a bit complicated. hopefully that muddied the water sufficiently.
I guess the concern is, you're going through this, and the wait time sometimes to get some of this diagnostic imaging can be lengthy, and you get to the date where your scan is scheduled for, and you're not experiencing the back pain if it's going to show anything.
Yeah, so the underlying causes usually will still be there, even
right,
kicking off, with the caveat that the pain may not have anything to do with something that's visible on a scan, which is why, again, it's complicated.
So, Dr. John, is it fair to say that we use diagnostic imagery to rule things out, or to prove sort of theories as to what's happening, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. I think we do it too much to, rule things out when there's nothing. If your car rattles for 3 seconds, you don't take it to the mechanic and take the engine apart and pull off the transmission and change all the tires. You might say, "Well, the car rattled. I'll see if it rattles again." So sometimes it's a bit of overreach. People with minor back pain with no red flags for serious things, get sent for MRIs, clog up the system, but also end up waiting forever and getting frustrated because their scan doesn't show them perhaps what they wanted to see. And again, I explain this all the time. I mean, it's a picture, it's helpful information, but it often doesn't change anything. I prefer to do, most of the scans I do are, I suspect you have a herniated disc at L4. I want to confirm that and define it so that, a surgeon would have the information and the imagery to do something about it. If I just kick you firmly in the arse and your arse is sore, you don't need an MRI to tell you why you have a sore arse. Too much of that.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're going to take our first break. House Calls continues on the other side. You are listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. He's Dr. John Gillis, and we're back after the break. Welcome back. This is House Calls. He is Dr. John Gillis, here to answer your medical questions. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Dr. John, very quickly to the email bag, and this one comes to us from Mark, and it reads, I'm 70. I have, and my legs below my knees are always very cold, except when I first wake up in the morning. They get colder as the day goes on. The skin there often has a purple color. My doctor checked my pulse below my knees and said that I have a good pulse and can feel, though, how cold they are. He doesn't know the cause, though. Any ideas?
Well, there's a number of reasons, I guess, why we can experience a feeling of cold. The most common thing would probably be circulation. Feeling a pulse is a good guide, but you can still have poor general circulation even if the pulse feels fine. So getting some testing on the circulation might be worthwhile just to confirm that. Nerve damage can cause a sensation of cold, even though that maybe the temperature is fine objectively. People are diabetic and that sort of thing, and some drugs for nerve pain can certainly help. In terms of improving circulation and that sort of thing, wearing compression stockings to improve venous return can help flow. Making sure there's no damage to the feet or that sort of thing that you might not notice if you do have nerve damage. And look, there's a few other things that are relevant. Making sure you don't have a thyroid condition. Anemia can cause this because less blood in the extremities can make them feel colder. That's what anemia is when your red count is down. He mentioned it being purple, so it doesn't sound like a Raynaud's. Raynaud's is sort of when you get blood constriction in the periphery, often in the fingers, but can occur in the feet and legs as well. That tends to cause the skin to go white. So probably investigating those things a little bit more, and making sure that you keep yourself warm, that you wear either compression stockings for flow or even socks or stockings just to keep your legs warm in a more traditional sense. So that's probably where I would start.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. This next one, I'll put a bit of a caveat on, a bit of a of something that we haven't talked about a lot here on the program, and that is constipation, Dr. John. The writer says, originally I was just having constipation for a few days, having to strain to pass anything, but last week the straining was no longer enough, so I went and bought some over-the-counter laxatives, which and I started taking them that same day. At first, I was able to pass stool and feel that it had all worked its way out. But now, laxatives are the only way that anything can pass. It comes out in very small amounts, doesn't feel that all of it is passing, and I haven't experienced any big diet changes or lifestyle changes. I'm only mildly bloated, and I guess the laxatives are at least keeping things from backing up fully. I'm concerned that there's an underlying issue or that eventually the laxatives will stop working. Any advice?
Yeah, I mean, the most common cause is a change in something, diet or medication. Sometimes people don't realize something subtle, so take a good look at that. If you've noticed a big change, I mean, usually we worry about blood or really thin stools, but backing up represents a change. If you can't identify anything obvious, it probably is worth checking with your doctor to at least examine and do a full history, make sure there's nothing of concern, and perhaps some imaging would be indicated. Typically just with general constipation in the absence of pain or bleeding or really thin stools, we don't worry too much. It is important, of course, if someone's over 50 to do the stool test, as per the Nova Scotia program. Make sure there's no sign of bleeding, which could be a sign of a cancer in the bowels. If people keep up with that, that's very reassuring. But probably is worth double checking the diet and anything that may have changed. Sometimes it's as subtle as a spice or a cooking oil or something that's added that may be different that people don't realize. But I would definitely check in with your doc.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Lines are wide open, folks, if you have a question for Dr. Gillis. I got another email question. This one changing gears up a little bit, Dr. John. It says, "Hi, Dr. John. I'm 7 weeks pregnant, and this is my first time. Week or so ago, I had my first experience with morning sickness, and it was pretty awful, I bet. I felt nausea constantly and threw up almost everything I ate. I'd get physically sick at the mention of specific foods, and overall was doing pretty bad and unable to eat or drink without getting sick and unable to get up or even go out. My midwife prescribed me some Zolfam generic, which I've been taking for the nausea. It's helped me mildly for 4 days, but for the last week or so, I've been throwing up still 2 to 5 times daily. I'm concerned that I'm going to get dehydrated. Any thoughts?"
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's vomiting that much with Zofran, which is a strong, I mean, we use it a lot now. It used to be considered a chemo drug, help people having nausea and vomiting with chemo, but it's become more common. But that should work. There are some daily drugs that we use. Diclectin is a common one, more of as a preventative. I would check in with your healthcare provider about best options to prevent those nausea, morning sickness. But we do see women who are pregnant fairly frequently in the ER who just, no matter what they do early on, can't keep anything down, and we do have to give them intravenous Gravol or Zofran to break the cycle and also hydrate them. So, I think it's a combination of try to keep yourself hydrated as best you can. If you can't hydrate, it's not the wrong thing to do to go to the ER and get checked. But I would circle back with family doc about finding the best options for hydration and such, but also for nausea prevention.
I would imagine that dehydration is bad for everybody, but somebody that's pregnant is probably worse, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just obviously you want to do everything you can for the new baby and make sure you're healthy. And pregnancy just magnifies these things. Not that I want to be able to empathize, but having seen a lot of women, really struggling with, some women it's minor, some it passes, but some women really suffer and struggle, and there's help there. So hopefully get some help and adjust things a little bit to make things better.
The telephone number is 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're going to take a break, get an update on the news. House Calls continues on the other side. Again, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the break. All right, we're back. It's House Calls. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That's the way that you get on to the program. Again, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Dr. John, another email question comes to us from Paul, and it reads, I had a cortisone injection in my knee for OA, and I'm assuming that's osteoarthritis, about a week ago. The knee is still sore. I was quite active the days following, as I was not told to otherwise. Is that why the cortisone shot is no longer working?
That's a hard question to answer. I mean, it could be that it didn't take fully. It could be that you irritated something in the stuff you were doing. It's hard to say. Sometimes people get a delayed inflammation from a shot, in the joint, but usually that happens fairly quickly. So any of those things, it's hard to say. I mean, if you're concerned about it, get someone to take a look at it. It may be that it took temporarily, and it's, obviously, we know what we're doing, and we try to get all the cortisone and all the freezing that goes with it into the best spot. Sometimes only a bit of the drug gets there, so there's a shortened effect. But it's hard to know without, examining somebody directly. Okay.
Can you get it done again, or is there a wait time, or how does that work?
Usually we say every 3 months. I mean, if I'm convinced that it just didn't take or didn't hit the area, sometimes I'll do it again. But again, worth chatting with your doc about that.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That's the number to join the conversation. Lots of lines open if you want to get on. Another email question comes to us from a shift worker, Dr. John, who's been working a variety of shifts for 6 years, and says, I've never been able to sleep on night shift. I get a maximum of 4 hours sleep, and I wake up at least twice. No issue sleeping for the day shift or my days off. It's not possible not to work nights in my profession. I don't drink caffeine. Anytime I tried some medication, I exercise regularly, I eat healthy. I don't think I can make any more lifestyle changes. I've been diagnosed with anxiety, however, and I've made a lot of lifestyle adjustments, but I haven't taken any medication for 2.5 years besides any sleep aids. Do you have any suggestions for me?
So I just wasn't clear at the beginning. It was the person saying they can't sleep after a night shift or while they're there?
It says, I've never been able to sleep on night shift, so I'm assuming they're not sleeping at work, so I'm assuming it's after the night shift.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, and I find the same thing. I used to be able to, when I was 20, I could, if I was on a train in Europe, I could sleep, under the seat with, a loud party happening around me. Now, if a mouse runs by, I wake up. Optimizing the environment is key, and sometimes, sleep aids are required. If they've said they haven't tried anything in a while, it may be that they need something, mild to help them deal with those cycles. But I empathize. I do one night every 2 weeks now. I was doing them every week, and it was a mess. I just couldn't sleep properly, and it was wrecking me for the week. Now the one. I make sure I take extra time the next day, and it's working for me. But optimize the environment and look at maybe a mild sleep aid to get back on a regular pattern.
Are the over-the-counter sleep aids effective, Dr. John, or should this be something that you get from your doc?
Everybody's different, so where to start. You can start with things like magnesium, melatonin, stuff like that. If that's not working, have a chat with your provider to see what the best option is.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let us welcome Greg to the show. Greg, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Your question for Dr.
Hi,
John,
doctor.
please. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's my mother. She's going to be 89 soon. I mean, you're talking about the vaccines and all this stuff. She's might well had them all, okay? And my sister and I said, like, when do we, say enough's enough here? Because she doesn't go anywhere. She stays home, right? There's only two people at the house, my sister and my brother-in-law. The two daughters are moved out. So, there's no really any risk of getting anything. So we're just thinking, well, maybe it's time just to lay off a bit. Do you think that's wise, or should we keep on going?
Well, I guess the question I would ask you is why? For what reason would you lay off? Are you worried about something in particular?
No, it's not that. It's just I'm thinking that, you said before, there's a lot of people in the house and they're coming in and out, and that's where the risk of transmitting, flus and all this other stuff, and especially with her compromised lungs. But now there's just my sister and her husband in there. Like, there's not all kinds of people. That's what I'm thinking. Or maybe we should keep on going.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's fair. That lowers the risk a lot. Being exposed to 2 people as opposed to 20, that certainly lowers your risk. It doesn't take it to 0. So, I still think keeping up with routine immunizations is smart. If it's a massive, if she lives on the tip of Cape Breton and has to travel to, Sydney to get a flu shot, well, that would expose her to a lot more people. That's probably not worth it. If it's an easy thing to do on a regular basis, I still recommend keeping up with it, because you'd be surprised when people get exposed. The 2 that are there may come home, feel fine, expose her, get a mild case of something, but it may be worse for her. So it's just finding that balance. I understand what you're saying. I would lean towards keeping up with it as long as it's not too much of a hassle.
Thanks for the call, Greg. I appreciate it. Best of luck with your mom. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Dr. John, we've talked about ibuprofen and acetaminophen a lot on the program. This emailer has a question about naproxen, and it writes, I take 250 milligrams of naproxen daily, and it helps me a lot with my inflammation. I'm 20 years old. I always take it with food, and my question is, how long can I take this amount safely?
It's a tough question to answer. Any anti-inflammatory can cause stomach problems, kidney problems. I have a lot of patients that are on them long term and watch for side effects. We recommend if people are on them long term, like over a year, to get kidney function checked and keep an eye on blood pressure. But within reason, indefinitely, with the caveat that you have to watch those things. Choose the anti-inflammatory that's right for you. Naproxen's a good choice. That's a low dose. And, ideally try and find out, if there's another way of dealing with the problem. I take naproxen or similar when I'm, beat myself up playing sports, but I don't take it regularly. I only need it if I'm, flared up or, running or lifting weights, or I, do something to myself. So, is there a scenario where you only take it as needed versus taking it every day? And everybody finds that balance. So they are safe, but there are caveats and things to keep an eye on, is what I would say.
Is there a difference between naproxen and other ibuprofens like Advil, Dr. John? They're obviously 2 different drugs?
Ibuprofen and naproxen are 2 different drugs. The ibuprofen, the trade name is Aleve, ibuprofen is Advil or Motrin.
Right.
Naproxen, the trade name that we see is Aleve. They basically do the same things. What I often say to people, ibuprofen is a better drug. Naproxen doesn't really work at all for fever. Ibuprofen does. Ibuprofen is the go-to along with Tylenol, even though they're very different drugs for treating fevers. For treating inflammatory pain, ibuprofen is fine, unless you can find the 12-hour formulation, though. It tends to be a little more difficult to use because it needs to be taken 4 times a day. Naproxen is a twice-a-day drug. So I often suggest people take naproxen if they're taking it for pain and inflammation, just because it's easier to kind of take it morning and night, not have to be worrying about rifling around for a bottle of ibuprofen at lunchtime or during the day. But effectively, they do the same thing.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Taking a break. Dr. John will be here till the top of the hour. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back in minutes. Decently fine throughout the day, but at night all hell breaks loose because I keep accidentally squishing it and chewing on my cheek in my sleep. Any suggestions?
Yeah, not an easy thing. I mean, sometimes it reflects a dental problem, an alignment problem. Usually they just have to heal. The things you're doing to settle it down are the best. It's not like you can put a Band-Aid on it.
Right.
There's some people who wear mouth guards and that sort of thing at night, which sort of protect their cheek. But I guess what I would say is keep it as clean as possible. Continue to, do the oral solutions to keep it clean, and it should just settle down. No magic, unfortunately.
Does the saline solution work for that too? The salt and water?
Yeah, that's probably the most common thing people use to just to keep it clean. And it's annoying, and it's like having a cut on your lip. There's not much you can do about it. Every time you try to eat, chew, or talk, it's a problem. But they do settle down pretty quickly. The area is very vascular, so hopefully it'll settle down pretty quickly.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. A very quick question here, Dr. John. We were talking about pain relievers earlier on, and Judith writes, hello. My question is, why does caffeine help to relieve pain?
Does it give any context? That's all it says?
That's all it says. I guess the bigger question is, does caffeine help to relieve pain?
Yeah, caffeine is commonly used, I guess in this context, for migraines. So you'll often see it formulated with acetaminophen, aspirin, or ibuprofen in headache type pills. It's also in codeine. So the common formulation of Tylenol 3 or Lenotec 3, which we see around now, another trade name, has caffeine in it. The idea is it affects blood flow. With migraines, it causes constriction of blood vessels. Don't totally understand how and why it helps migraines, because migraines aren't fully understood. But it can really help with those sort of things. There is some belief that it actually has an effect on some pain receptors as well. So it can have a pain relieving effect as well. So, some people who feel a migraine coming on, they just knock back, a big cup of coffee and it helps. If I get them rarely, I find the same thing. I find if I get an ibuprofen and a Diet Coke into me, don't mix them together. I did that once. That was bad. It can get rid of it. So that's why. There's something on pain receptors, but with migraines in particular, it's how it affects the blood vessels, causing them to constrict.
That's going to about do it, Dr. John. We're out of emails, and the lines are clear, so we'll give you back a few minutes of your time. What's Christmas look like for you this year?
Well, I'm going to be around for Christmas, getting away for a couple days this weekend, but I'll be around. So you have a Merry Christmas. I guess we are not around the next couple of weeks, so Merry Christmas to you and to all our friends out there. Best of this holiday season. Thanks
for everything this year, Dr. John. We'll talk to you in 26.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
That is Dr. John Gillis. Going to take a couple of weeks off for the Christmas holidays, but we'll be back with house calls in the new year. So keep those questions coming, and we'll try and get them answered. There's a lot to talk about today, folks, with regards to the open hour. There's plenty of things happening. I'm getting all kinds of responses from y'all with regards to yesterday's decision from Halifax Water. It wasn't even really Halifax Water's decision. It was the Energy and Utility Board, or whatever it's called now, saying that the 36% increase in water rates was, and I'm quoting here, unjustified and overestimated, and told the utility to take their homework back and redo it. Remember that in school? I certainly do. And come back next week with a different number. Now that has thrown everything into flux, right? We were staring down the gauntlet of a 36% increase in water rates. Now we just don't know. It's probably not going to be the full, was it 17% that we were looking at for 26 because of all of this business? But at the end of the day, we really just don't know what it's going to be. Halifax Water yesterday said they needed that money for inflation and rising interest rates and depleted reserve funds, aging infrastructure, and depreciation, and that there was no profit built into this 36% increase. In making its decision yesterday, and this is kind of where the response that I've received thus far has kind of centered on, and it's in response to its decision yesterday, the Utilities and Review Board, or the Energy Board, as it's called now, suggested that Halifax Water approach HRM for some help with some of these cost overruns that it has. Mayor Fillmore very quickly putting out a statement yesterday saying thanks, but no thanks. And in fact, is taking it one step further and is now asking for the cities and the provinces' auditors general to take a look at the inner workings of Halifax Water. All of this is, as I mentioned with Steve Murphy, and off the top of the program today, there was some reporting earlier this week, CTV breaking the story that there was an internal review underway for some financial irregularities at the utility. I'm very curious as to what your thoughts are on Halifax Water and this decision yesterday from the Energy Board. It, I don't think it's accomplished much. I guess that one side of the equation is that the UARB has said no to the utility. But it was more of a no, but response. So we could be staring down an increase. Well, we will be staring down an increase next year, but we don't know what's going to happen in 27. Will it get made up in 27? Are we just kicking the can down the road? There are so many unanswered questions. And at the end of the day, you as the ratepayer are the ones who are going to end up picking up the bill. I'm curious as to what your thoughts on that are today. We're going to open up the telephone lines after the news at the top of the hour here to get your thoughts on this and whatever it is you like to talk about. It's the beauty of the open hour. We're going to apply the regular rules as we usually do, and you can bring whatever it is to the table. There's some drama unfolding in Quebec this hour as Pablo Rodriguez, who was a prominent figure in the Trudeau cabinet during the Trudeau years of government, who was elected as the leader of the Quebec Liberal Party, is stepping down, according to reports this hour from Radio-Canada. Now, we're not sure what exactly is going on and when this is going to be made official, but there has been some turmoil within that party for several weeks in Quebec. Now, there's some allegations that the host of, this is from the CBC, by the way, there's some allegations that the host of a fundraising event handed $500 in cash back to about 20 people who couldn't afford the entry price, effectively covering their donations, which is illegal under Quebec's election laws. In a statement today, the Liberal Party confirmed Rodriguez was present at the event, but maintained that neither he nor his team had any knowledge of these alleged payouts. And that's just one of the several blows that the Rodriguez camp has been dealing with. So it looks like more political turmoil in Quebec as the leader of the Liberal Party in that province, Pablo Rodriguez, has apparently made the decision to resign. We'll get an update on that coming up in the news, and we're going to throw open those telephone lines right now, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Your thoughts on Halifax Water and the decision that was made by the Energy Board, the former UARB yesterday, to send it back, saying that it was unjustified and overestimated, and where we're going to go from here with our water bills. 902-405-6000. 1-877-801-8255. But before we do that, Vanessa tells me that we have something in the stocking, correct? There are two things in the stocking. We've got 2 pairs of tickets for the Halifax Mooseheads, who are taking on the St. John's Sea Dogs tomorrow at Scotiabank Centre. If you'd like to go and cheer on the Moose as they get ready for their Christmas break and take on their cross-provincial rivals, the Sea Dogs, here's a chance to go on us. 2 pairs of tickets. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Callers number 6. Vanessa picked these, 6 and 7. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. This is hour number 3 of the Wednesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ulstrand, and ladies and gentlemen, she is Vanessa Vandenez. Vanessa, how are you?
I'm being punished right now.
No, you are not. People constantly send me emails saying that I talk about you all the time, and I tell everybody what a great job that is you do, but we never hear from you. So
that's okay. I'm behind the glass.
See, that's right. But you're not in a bottle.
No, that's true.
There's a microphone standing right there. The reason why we want to chat with Vanessa is because we just had an early Christmas present for a couple of people. Who were the winners?
The winners today were Michael Vardy and Alan McMaster.
Congratulations. A way to start the holiday season with the Halifax Mooseheads. And you never know. Vanessa is walking by that prize closet constantly, so you never know when something's going to fall out.
We might have a couple next week. I'm not saying when, though.
It's up to her. It really is. Thank you, Vanessa.
You're welcome, Dan.
That is Vanessa Vandenez, ladies and gentlemen. Round of applause. She does an outstanding job here on the program, day in and day out. And she gets mad at me when I put her on the radio. So that's why we did that. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. It is now time for the open hour. Lines are wide open, everybody. Again, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. I'm sure that there are many of you out there that are wanting to maybe respond to the decision yesterday by the Utilities Review Board, whatever it's called now, the former UARB, to their decision to essentially tell Halifax Water to, yeah, we'll give you a bit of an increase, but we just won't tell you how much, at least not yet, until you redo your homework and hand it in, and we'll get a decision by the end of next week. Now, for context, those of you will remember that we were staring down the gauntlet of a 36% increase in water rates this year and next. And in its review yesterday, in its decision yesterday, the utilities regulator in the province of Nova Scotia said no. And I'm quoting here. The increase, the 35.6% increase, was unjustified and overestimated. That was what the former UARB said. Now, we're going to see an increase next year, there's no doubt. But with 15 days left in the calendar, we still don't know by how much. Now, that decision is expected next week, but of course, I'm going to suggest that many of you out there are going to work till Friday, and then a lot of you are taking the week off for Christmas. We're not. We're going to be here till Christmas Eve. But I know a lot of you are. I know kids are getting done with school, and you're going to start things early. So maybe by design, or is that just being a conspiracy theorist on my behalf? So we don't know. We don't know what your water bill is going to be in January, or at least what the percentage increase of your water bill is going to be in January. Halifax Water said yesterday that in response to the decision that they need the money to fight inflation and to deal with rising interest rates and depleted reserve funds, along with aging infrastructure and depreciation. They did also say that there was no profit built into the rate increase. Now, the part that kind of raised my eyebrow, that obviously raised my eyebrow, but the one that really didn't sit well in my gut was the regulator, the former UARB, yesterday suggesting that Halifax Water turn to the city, to HRM, to quote, absorb financial shortfalls that have contributed to its accumulated deficit. To me, that's them saying, why don't you go to the city and see if they'll bail you out a little. Now, Mayor Fillmore was very quick to respond to that yesterday. Lightning speed from the mayor, who said, and of course I'm paraphrasing here, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We'll pass on that. The mayor now taking it one step further, and something that if you were listening earlier in the show when we had Steve Murphy in studio, said was the right thing to do, and I concur. I think it's the appropriate plan of action for this. Given some of the issues that we've experienced with Halifax Water, you remember back to the fluoride thing? Do you remember to the water restrictions? Now, that's not necessarily in their power, but we do know that Lake Major has had those water restrictions for a couple of years now, and that there's been talk of this re-engineering of the intake. And maybe it takes that long for it to happen. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. But the mayor's now asking for the city's auditor general and the province's auditor general to team up and do a review of the internal governance of the utility. I think that's appropriate. I think that's the right mechanism to get some answers on what's going on at Halifax Water. And now, let's not forget, and I've said this a couple of times this morning, that it has been reported this week that there is an internal review underway right now at Halifax Water looking into financial irregularities at the utility. So here's your opportunity to share your thoughts on Halifax Water as we roll through the week here. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That's the question. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Lots of lines open if you want to join the conversation, folks. In fact, they're wide open. If you want to get on and get on quickly, here's an opportunity to do so. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We heard from the Port of Halifax earlier this week, that they had a pretty good 2025 cruise season. Officials say that HRM had its strongest season yet. Its longest season yet, running from April 4th through the 19th of November. 357,000 passengers and 151,000 crew members stopped by to say hi here in Halifax during the cruise season this year. That's a significant amount of people visiting the city. We know that tourism numbers won't be released until probably the first quarter of next year. It will be by the time we get through December and all of the numbers are tabulated and coordinated. That being said, I think that we're seeing an increase, an uptick in tourism in our part of the world because people are looking for alternatives than traveling to the U.S. And I know some of you are saying, no, I'm going to the U.S. anyway, Dad, I don't care. And that's fine. But the stats don't lie, that people cross-border traffic by car, by air are down, and I think people are looking at alternatives and are planning to spend some time here on our coast. Now, you will say, and you're correct in saying, that a lot of those cruise ships are coming from the United States here, and you're right. But I think it's an indicator as to where people want to go these days as opposed to the traditional areas that we've heard of and seen in the past. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's go to the phones and welcome Barbara to the show. Barbara, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
I definitely think there should be an audit of the Water Commission. I mean, geez, they've been running their company for 80 years, and if in 80 years they haven't been able to balance their books or have a profit or need to now gouge the public in 2006, it's ridiculous. They definitely need to be audited.
Right, and I think that the Auditor General is probably the way to do that, right?
Absolutely. Like they can't police themselves. And same with Nova Scotia Profit. They shouldn't be auditing themselves, or it's got to be an independent, somebody who has nothing to do with them. So definitely, Auditor General.
Barbara, appreciate the call.
You're welcome.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Not making fun of Barbara at all, but a Freudian slip there, I think. She meant to say Nova Scotia Power, but she said Nova Scotia Profit. Maybe she did that on purpose. It would be an appropriate term, wouldn't it, when you're guaranteed 9% a year? We're going to take a break. The open hour continues on the other side. Phone lines are wide open, folks. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. This is the open hour on the Todd Veinotte Show on a midweek Wednesday. Telephone lines are open, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. You can certainly tell when it's the temperatures are a little bit warmer and people have been holed up inside for a couple of days, particularly during this hour of the program. They tend to the lines tend to be a little bit light during these parts of Wednesdays when it's relatively nice outside. And I was just speaking with somebody during the break, and it has warmed up a bunch, and we're supposed to see that temperature continue to rise here over the next couple of days, up to 12 degrees on Friday. Can you believe that? It's not going to feel a whole lot like Christmas when we have 12 degrees. Not that I'm complaining, folks. It was Vanessa and I were chatting this morning when I got into the studio, and we often ask, how things are. And I said, well, it's kind of nice not to have to scrape the windows today, right? So we've been doing that a lot. We've had what's the best way to describe this December? Is this just maybe the old normal? I don't want to say it's abnormal because it's December. We get these. I have pictures of large snowstorms that we've had where the city's been shut down, the plows are out, and we had the loaders and everything going. But we've grown accustomed to Decembers that are relatively mild, right? I mean, I think the normal temperature, and I stand to be corrected, I think it's around 3 degrees. And we've been minus 10, minus 12. I think we got one morning I was at minus 16 at the apartment. Those are their January and February temperatures, right? Hopefully, maybe it's out of its system now. Am I being an optimist? Maybe it's out of its system now, and we'll have a mild winter from here out. We talked about Halifax Water a lot today, and we're certainly looking for your thoughts on Halifax Water and its water rate increase as part of the open hour today. But we do know that we were in a pretty significant drought earlier this year, and we certainly need as much precipitation as we can get those water levels up. Don't want to disparage that at all. But I can tell you, at least people that I've spoken to are not happy that they've had to dig out the snow shovels and do we still call them long johns? The long thermal underwear this early in December, and some are warning of a foreboding winter. Do you follow the old wives' tales? And I don't know if that's even an appropriate term anymore, but the legends when it comes to predicting the weather. I think there was I think it was Cindy Day that put out a book with a whole book of them, right? I think it was Grandma Says it was called. But do you follow the weather prognosticating legends that we have? I can tell you that my grandmother, not to steal Cindy's title, but my grandmother used to watch the mountain ash berries on the tree. And if there was a lot of mountain ash berries, it was going to be cold. If the mountain ash berries were high up in the tree, there was going to be a lot of snow because they stick around for a long time. And the theory is that it provides food for the animals during the winter. Well, I was walking around the neighborhood yesterday, and we have a couple of mountain ashberry trees in our neighborhood. And I'll tell you, there's still a lot of berries left on there. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll ask Alistair if these things hold true when he comes in on Friday. But holy smokes, it could be a long winter if we're already at this point. Anyway, enough. To the phones. Jed, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
So I hate to be so negative around the holidays, but for a province where we pay, I think, what is it, like the second highest tax of any province, the amount of infrastructure problems that we have is insane to me. When it comes to either water or power, I know we're talking about water, but like I moved here from the United States like 6 years ago. I've lived in Mexico and places like that. And it's amazing to me, because I live right downtown, it's amazing to me how many times I've either lost water or had boil orders for the water system here. And it's amazing like that they are trying to increase rates and stuff. And I'm just wondering where are all our tax dollars going to? And this province has just been extremely slow to repair or do anything with infrastructure. And then, like, especially even with, like, electric. Don't even get me started with the electric.
Right.
I mean, losing power 4 times a year. But, yeah, it's a little nutty to me.
It's an interesting perspective, right? Because, people that have lived here a long time, much longer than you, Jed, I don't think you ever get quite used to it, but it just becomes part of the vernacular, right? It's just like, oh, well, there's the power again, or, oh, well, there's a water main break, right? But, you're relatively new to the area, and I'm relatively new to the area. I've only been here for 15 years, but I get emails daily from Halifax Water with emergency repairs that are underway, and there are many each and every week.
Yeah, and like they're out there doing it, but I mean, it seems like it's just they're putting their Band-Aid fixes. But yeah, it's wild and I love Canada. Canada's given me so many opportunities that I would have not have gotten even in the States, and I love it here. But it is a little strange to me for like a first world country that we're still having these kinds of issues. And again, I've only been here for like I think now 6 years now, but. I try not to be pessimistic. It is the holidays,
right?
But it would be nice to see some sort of change and not just to have them jacking up our rates for services like this.
Well said, Jed. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
All right, take it easy.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. It's Steve Murphy touched on it when he was in earlier in the show today. Some of the infrastructure under our city streets is extremely old, and I too have heard stories from those that work in the utilities field that some of the water carrying infrastructure that we have underneath our streets is still wood, and it's well over 100 years old. And those water main breaks and those utility breaks are frequent. And I know every city has them. And it's water, it's cold, it's frost. But it just seems to happen here more often, doesn't it? And right, I'm not even going to get into the power thing because that happens every time there's wind, which there's wind all over the country. And I don't see the same amount of utility issues that we have here. So Jed's right? We're constantly being asked to fork out more, but yet, are we getting the service for the dollar? 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the update. Welcome back. Open Hour continues right to the top of the clock. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Normal rules apply, folks. You can chat about whatever it is on your mind. Again, those numbers are 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Donna.
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Something I want to talk about is some of the people that are abusing the handicap spots in the different parking lots There's people coming in, they don't have the handicap tag, they don't have a license plate on their car or whatever, and different times, I have one, I have to use it, I have a problem with my leg, and a lot of people, when you get in and out of the car, if you've got a problem, you have to open the door as far as you can to get your legs in and out, right?
Right.
Now, some people park kind of close, and I know even myself, couldn't find a handicap spot, so I had to park in a normal spot, but when I went to get out to my car, I couldn't get in the door. So, because somebody in the next spot had parked kind of close. So then I would wait till somebody came out and say, could you please do me a favor? Could you back my car out? And someone that was, well enough to do it, and they did it. But anyway, there's a lot of people, and I've mentioned to people, these spots are for people that are, that need them. And I've been told to F off, mind your own effing business, your old bag, and the whole 9 yards. And I was talking to two ladies a couple of weeks ago. Both of them, one was hit by a drunk driver. She's in a wheelchair, and the other one's in an electric wheelchair. And they said the same thing. They said the spots, I don't know who the ladies were, but I talked to everybody. We were gabbing and yakking, and they said it's terrible. There's not enough spots around, and they can't find spots like when drivers drive them wherever they have to go for appointments, and I just wish more people, and I don't know what you can do, what you can say to the people, and who you can call. I mean, there's no point in calling the city and saying send a policeman to ticket these people, but it's extremely rude. And it's not fair to the people that really do need them. The other day I happened to be at Superstore, and right next door is the liquor store. I was sitting in my spot listening to the talk show for a bit, for 5 minutes before I got out of my car.
Thank you for that.
And this guy came whizzing in, great big car, got out he parked in the handicap spot next to me, went into the liquor store and came out carrying a case of beer in each hand. Well, if you can carry a case of beer in each hand, you certainly don't need to get into a handicap spot. Anyway, that's my little thing. But all these people that abuse the spots, that there are people out there that really, really, really need them, I hope Santa brings you a lump of coal. Anyway,
thanks,
that's
Donna.
my spiel for the day.
Have a good day.
Okay, thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I don't think there's many of us out there that have not seen somebody offending on this, and Donna's right. Those spots are for people that really and truly need them. Now, if depending on your ailment, I'm not going to pass judgment on somebody if they have the sticker, if they have the mirror hanger or whatever it is now, or the license plate, and they are permitted to park in a one of those designated parking spots. I don't have an issue with that at all. But the one that I see the most is, and it's usually at the grocery store, and it's the couple that pull up in the car, and one person gets out to go and do the shopping, and the other sits in the car, and they pull into the designated parking spot with the engine running, and will move if somebody calls them out on it. What they don't realize is that people are driving around that parking lot looking for that spot that are genuinely needed and have the documentations to use that spot. It seems to be okay in some people's minds to take up a spot like that as long as your car's running and you're in it. And that goes for handicap parking spots and fire lanes. Go to Walmart and walk in, particularly the Walmart at Bears Lake, and walk in and see the cars parked in the zebra striped area that says no parking, fire lane, and there will be people with the engines running sitting in there, and will move once the security guard comes out, but will sit in that spot anyway, as long as the car running, and I can move it if a fire truck comes. Well, that's not the idea, folks. It's not. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Chris.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I am well. What's on your mind today?
Well, I'll tell you, to be honest with you, I only tuned into your show a few minutes ago because I was tied up with some work, so I don't know what the hot topic is today, but I did break in a little bit earlier, and you had, I think it's his name, Ken Russell from the investment
Kevin Russell.
owners group on there. Kevin Russell, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I do want to make a comment about that, but I did hear you mention about Halifax Water, and they don't know what they're going to get for a rate, and their justification, one thing, was rising interest rates. They must be living on a different planet than I am, because interest rates are lower now than they were a year ago.
They were, and they are,
So,
and it looks like they're going to stay steady like this right through all of 26.
Well, there is some talk in certain circles that are more knowledgeable than I am, and that's for sure, but that we may even get a rate or possibly slight rate increases towards the end of next year.
Right.
So given the fact that interest rates are for sure, documentedly, cheaper or less than they were a year or so ago, how can Halifax Water use that as a justification? I don't get it.
No, neither do I. Absolutely right.
And, of course, the rate doesn't include any profit.
Yep, that's what they said. It was in their statement.
Yeah, right. Oh, of course. Well, anyway, about their landlord thing, you're probably aware, and I know Todd is, that I spent most of my working career as a property manager and a rental property owner, so as a landlord as such. And the fixed-term lease is getting a pretty rough ride of late. Landlords seem to be using it to justify higher rent increases and so on, but I used fixed-term leases a lot when I was in the business because I rented to a lot of people. I had South End units mainly, and I got a lot of students. A lot of them would say, well, geez, I only need it for 8 months, or I've got one term of study left. I just need a 4-month lease. So I gave them those kind of leases, because what I found is that if you don't accommodate a person's needs and you make them sign a 1-year lease when going into it, they know they only need it for 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, whatever it might be. When the time comes, they're going to leave, and you're left holding the bag. You're going to have to fight it out anyway, so you just might as well take them on the 8-month or the 6-month or whatever it is that they need, help them out, help yourself out, because you know in advance, hey, 8 months down the road or whatever, unit number 1 or whatever it might be, that's coming up for rent. We know that as a matter of fact, so you can plan for that. So the problem with these rent controls or the caps they have on them and so on, the fixed-term lease, I don't look at it as a problem. I never did. It helped people, in my opinion. But when the government set up this 5% rent cap, they attached it to the tenancy, the tenant living in the unit, as opposed to the unit itself. And that was a big, big mistake. When throughout the 80s, I dealt with rent controls the entire time, because rent controls weren't abolished, I think, till 90 or 91 or 92 even, maybe something like that. And there was a provision there that if you needed more than the capped, than the legislated increase, you could make application to get that. Now, there was paperwork involved. It took time and so on, and that was fine. But at least the rate was attached to the unit. So when the tenant moved out, and say Dan decided to move in or Chris decided to move in, we weren't faced. The landlord was not allowed to give you a rental increase because it's tied to the unit. He or she, as a landlord, was regulated by whatever that percent of automatic increase without a review that was allowed. And it could be 2%, 1.5%, it could be 3%, it could be 5%, but it was attached to the unit. I think that should be, for sure, the government should change that, and they should attach it to the unit, for
Chris,
sure. It's the only fair thing to do.
That's an interesting perspective, Chris, but I've talked about enforcement in the past. How does the government enforce that?
Well, very, very simply. They have a registry where the tenant, when they're applying for a unit, and they could do it back in the 80s, it was done as well.
Okay.
The tenant could call the Rent Review Commission, as it was called back then, the Rent Review Commission, and say, I'm moving into unit number 1 ABC Street. Yep. Can you tell me what the registered allowable rent is on that unit?
So we could put it on a website, right?
Exactly. It could be verified. And tenants could call at any time they wanted, and that information was available to them. This was the days before online and stuff, of course.
Yes.
But you could call and get it. So then, or even in the middle of a tenancy, if you got a little, you got a rent increase and you thought, gee, I don't know if I should be getting this or not, you could call the Rent Review Commission. They would tell you, no, the anniversary date for the rental increase on your unit is January 1st. So October, you can't get your rental increase until January. So the landlord can't give it to you now. All that stuff could be verified. And what I found was that a lot of landlords left the rent the way it was rather than try and go for a bigger increase because they couldn't take the trouble and the time and effort to make application and then justify the fact that they needed a higher than regulated rent. If it's easy for a landlord to raise the rent without having to do paperwork, without having to be held accountable, they're going to raise it. One more comment, if I could.
Sure.
When Mr. Russell was on, was there some mention of how that landlords have it harder now than they did years ago with increases in expenses and so on?
And it was in relation to the cap. Is that they're unable to make good any utility increases because of the cap?
Well, if they had a rent review process like we had in the 80s, they could make application if they wanted or felt that they needed more than 5%. But I would argue that landlords do not have it any harder today than we did 30, 40, 50 years ago. As a percentage of rent, utilities are no more expensive for the landlord today than they were for me 20 or 30 years ago. They just weren't. I faced as high as 18% interest on my mortgages at one point. What is the interest rate on mortgages now? So financing costs are way, way cheaper now than they've ever been, literally. And I certainly never went through it. I thought when interest rates dropped to below 10% and I got into the single digits, I felt like opening a bottle of champagne and celebrating because I'd dealt with it for so many years at 13, 15, 18% and stuff. It was great to get it down to 9.5. So I don't buy it that landlords, if anyone's trying to argue that point, that landlords have it harder today. They don't. The vacancy rate is also way less than it was when I was in my heyday of rentals. We had as much as 5 and 6% vacancy many years. So landlords aren't dealing with that now. So I don't buy that. The budget deliberations, I want your opinion on this as well. As the budget deliberations move forward, I think council should tell us what, in fact, they are cutting. They just come out and say, oh, yeah, we've cut everything that we possibly can. I'd like a list. What did you cut and how much did you cut it? Prove it. Put your money where your mouth is. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that if you follow along in the meetings, you can likely do that yourself, but most people won't. And you're right. It won't be a line item that comes out, but I'm sure that information is available if you watch the proceedings.
Well, look at the time involved.
I watch all of them. I do.
They're the most boring thing you could ever watch. I mean, it's more interesting to watch paint dry, for God's sake.
It is. Thanks, Chris.
Anyway, Dan, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Up against the break. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Part of the daily preparation for the Todd Veinotte Show is watching those budget deliberations. And I can tell you what, during the House calls, there was an email asking for help in getting some sleep after a night shift. Watch the budget meetings. We're back after the break. I think we're going to have to put Councillor David Hensby onto our research staff because he sent me about 4 emails today on things that I may have said wrong or that he's providing further context on. And we were just chatting with Chris before the break about a list of things that get cut during the budgeting process. And I said, well, if you watch the budget meetings, then you'll get it yourself. But apparently it already exists. And it's called the BAL. BAL. It's called the Budget Adjustment List, according to David Hensby. Every added or deleted item from the budget is put on this list as the debate unfolds. So thank you very much, Councillor Hensby. I truly appreciate it. And I think maybe, this is Councillor Hensby's last term in office, at least at the city level. And who knows, maybe we'll employ him as one of our gophers. I'm sure he's going to get a joke out of that one. Anyway, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Very quickly before we go to the phone lines, this comes to us from Dawn, and it reads, Dan, I wonder, maybe tongue-in-cheek or maybe not, if part of the reason HRM has infrastructure problems, such as 100-year-old drainage pipes, that politicians find these issues not sexy enough. Think about it. Does the mayor want to have a ribbon-cutting ceremony in front of the site of a new arena or in front of a hole in the ground dug for new sewage pipes? Yes, sewage is not sexy enough. And that comes from Don. Don, I think it was Mayor Savage. And I think it was his first term. And we were talking about federal infrastructure money. And I do stand to be corrected on this one. And I think he said that the sewage or the water sewage infrastructure in Halifax was in need of repair desperately, and that the price tag was in close to $1 billion, and that was several years ago, and we never saw any of it because of what you said. It's just not. It's not tangible as opposed to sexy enough. Anyway, appreciate the email, Don. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, EFO.
Hello, how you doing this beautiful day?
I am well, sir. What's on your mind today?
I was just calling to share my related outrage to people who continue to park in places that they shouldn't park.
Right.
I had the blessing of dealing with our healthcare system last year, and I had some surgery, and so I needed to be in crutches for a while. And repeatedly, there was always somebody parked in the places that I needed. And we would go talk to them, and they were usually extremely rude when we're trying to tell them that we need them to move their car and that they shouldn't park there. So I don't know what we're going to do about this or how we can solve this problem, because we've got everything from delivery drivers to cab drivers. Even one time it was someone in like an ambulance car or something, which made no sense to me, that was parked there taking notes in their car. They could have done that somewhere else. And I had to ask them to move because I needed the spot. But I don't know what we can do in the city about it or how other cities solve it, but it's a serious problem. And I think there needs to be a cultural education about the fact that those spots for emergencies and also for people who need, they used to call it handicap parking spots, those need to be left alone and not used as temporary spots for people to put their cars. But I don't know what we can do about it, but something needs to be done because I don't need it anymore, but every time I drive by spots, I still see people parked there that shouldn't be there.
Great call, EFO. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. It's got to be a special person, right, that would get angry at somebody for calling them out for breaking that rule. It's against the law. And for somebody, and this is the second caller that we've had today that said that people are rude and they swear. Well, you're the one who's afoul of the law when why would you yell at somebody for that? You're not entitled to have that front row parking spot in front of the door. If you've got the need for it, absolutely. If you've got the tags or the plates, absolutely. And you have the right as that person to be upset if somebody who's not is parking in that spot. But yet you turn it around on people. What a world. Last word today goes to Al. Al, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
I am well. What's on your mind, Al?
I've noticed that in the last couple of years, things have happened to the advantage of the public. Like we get free tolls now. There's no such things as tolls.
Right.
The hotels have free parking and stuff. And all of a sudden, then you get on the other side of the street and they start arguing about the bus doesn't have any power. You can't get the bus there on time and stuff like that. But if I live in Clayton Park and I have a car and I'm going to work and I'm willing to take the bus, I got to pay another $60, $80 a month and stuff. If the bus was free, that might tempt me.
Free transit. So then that would, I mean, obviously we know that transit's already subsidized by the city, right? Because it doesn't make enough money to break even. So you say go a whole step further and just make it free for everyone.
Well, the finance part should be kept out of it, like there was out of the bridge. Like they lost money on the bridge.
$40 million a year on the bridge.
Yeah, exactly. So, like Pan said, they want people to use transit, and they say it's impossible to get them to use transit. But if you make it free, it gets pretty tempting.
It certainly does, and 24 hours also.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. And I think that if everybody's having a hard time to live, and you have a car, you got car payments, insurance payments, and then all of a sudden, geez, I think I'll try to help the city out. I think I'll take a bus, and then I got to buy a pass. I don't know what they are, $70, $80, $100 a month. And, that might be a little rough on my pocketbook, right? So I would stay away from it. But if I could have it free, wow, that'd be tempting.
Great call, Al. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
That's going to do it, folks, for the Wednesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. Thanks to all our guests for coming into the studio and bringing me coffee and for joining the conversation. I truly appreciate it. I learn stuff from you every day. Thank you to all of you who picked up the phone and dialed the numbers for the open hours and so on and so forth. It certainly lights up the room when you do that. Thank you to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass, doing an outstanding job as always. Until tomorrow, folks, be well, and remember, be kind to one another.